Sarah Matthews clutched her pink-adorned rifle case as she stepped out of her father's old pickup truck. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty parking lot of Pine Ridge Shooting Range, where pickup trucks with gun racks and motorcycles dominated the landscape. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she surveyed the intimidating scene before her. The rifle case, decorated with sparkly pink decals and her name written in glittery letters, suddenly felt like a beacon announcing her presence to every experienced shooter in the vicinity. She had customized it herself during high school, never imagining she would one day carry it into serious competition. What had seemed fun and personal then, now felt childish and out of place among the professional-grade equipment cases surrounding her. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" her father, Tom Matthews, asked as he retrieved his own weathered gun case from the truck bed. His voice carried the gentle concern of a man who had watched his daughter face disappointment before. Tom had been shooting competitively for over 20 years, and he understood the unforgiving nature of the sport better than anyone. Sarah nodded, though her confidence wavered. "I've been practicing for months, Dad. I know I can do this." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The truth was, she had been preparing for this moment since she graduated from college 6 months ago. After years of shooting recreationally with her father, she had finally decided to enter her first official competition. As they walked toward the registration table, Sarah became acutely aware of the stares and whispers following her. The shooting community in their small Montana town was tight-knit and predominantly male. While women participated, they were often seasoned veterans who had earned their respect through years of proven skill. Sarah, at 22, was an outsider trying to break into a world where reputation meant everything. Well, what do we have here?" The voice belonged to Jake Morrison, a local shooting legend who had won the Pine Ridge Championship 3 consecutive years. He stood near the registration table with his usual group of followers, his arms crossed as he observed Sarah's approach. "Looks like someone's daddy bought her a pretty toy." The comments sparked laughter from his companions. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to keep walking. She had expected this kind of reaction, though experiencing it firsthand proved more challenging than she had anticipated. Her father's jaw tightened beside her, but he remained silent, knowing she needed to handle this herself. "Morning, Jake," Tom said simply as they passed. Jake had competed against Tom for years and respected his shooting ability, but that respect clearly did not extend to Tom's daughter. At the registration table, an elderly woman named Betty looked up with kind eyes. "First time competing, dear?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, pulling out her competition license and entry fee. "Sarah Matthews." Betty's expression softened as she processed the paperwork. "Tom's daughter? I've heard he's been teaching you to shoot." "That's wonderful." Her encouragement felt genuine, providing a small comfort against the hostile atmosphere Sarah sensed from other competitors. As Sarah filled out her forms, she overheard conversations happening around her. The comments ranged from mildly dismissive to openly mocking. Someone mentioned participation trophies, while another voice suggested the competition should have separate divisions for serious shooters and hobbyists. $50 says she doesn't hit the target past 50 yards, came a voice from behind her. "I'll take that bet," another responded. "My money says she'll quit after the first round." Sarah's pen trembled slightly as she signed her name, but she completed the registration process with outward composure. She had grown up in this community, attended the same schools as many of these people, yet she felt like a complete outsider. The competition format was straightforward, 5 stages of increasing difficulty, starting with stationary targets at 50 yards and progressing to moving targets at distances up to 300 yards. Points were awarded based on accuracy and time, with the highest cumulative score determining the winner. It was a format Sarah had practiced extensively, though always under her father's patient guidance rather than the pressure of public scrutiny. "All right, competitors," announced Range Master Bill Harrison, a respected figure whose word was law on the shooting grounds. "We've got 23 shooters today. You know the rules. Safety first, respect second, accuracy third. May the best shooter win." Sarah found herself assigned to firing position 12, directly between two seasoned competitors who barely acknowledged her presence. To her left stood Marcus Webb, a grizzled veteran in his 50s who had been competing since before Sarah was born. To her right was Danny Price, a cocky young man who had earned his reputation through consistent top-5 finishes. As competitors began setting up their equipment, Sarah carefully removed her rifle from its distinctive case. The weapon itself was serious business, a custom-built precision rifle that Tom had helped her select and configure. Despite its pink accents and decorative touches, the gun represented months of careful research and significant financial investment. "Look at that thing," Danny muttered to Marcus, making no effort to lower his voice. "Looks like something you'd find at a toy store." Marcus chuckled but said nothing, focusing on his own setup. Sarah pretended not to hear, methodically assembling her shooting rest and organizing her ammunition. Every movement felt scrutinized, every decision questioned by invisible judges. The first stage was called, and competitors lined up for the 50-yard stationary target round. This was Sarah's comfort zone, a distance she had practiced countless times with her father. The targets were standard bullseyes, black circles on white backgrounds that seemed almost friendly compared to the hostile faces surrounding her. "Shooters ready!" Bill's voice carried across the range. Sarah settled into position, her rifle resting comfortably against her shoulder. Through her scope, the target looked clear and achievable. She had made this shot hundreds of times in practice. Her breathing steadied, her heart rate slowed, and, for a moment, the mockery and doubt faded into background noise. "Take aim." The familiar ritual of competitive shooting began to calm her nerves. This was something she understood, something she had trained for. Whatever happened next, she was prepared to show these people that appearance could be deceiving. Fire! The first shots rang out across the range, a symphony of precision and power that marked the beginning of Sarah's journey from mockery to respect. She squeezed her trigger smoothly, feeling the familiar recoil and hearing the sharp crack that indicated a clean shot. Through her scope, she could see her bullet hole appeared very close to the center of the target. Around her, other shooters were completing their first rounds with varying degrees of success. The electronic scoring system would provide precise measurements, but initial observations suggested a typical spread of accuracy for the opening stage. As the first round concluded, Sarah felt a small surge of confidence. She had hit her target cleanly, and, despite the intimidating atmosphere, her shooting fundamentals had remained solid. The pink rifle that had drawn so much attention had performed exactly as expected. However, she knew the real challenges lay ahead. The subsequent stages would test not just her accuracy, but her ability to adapt to changing conditions and maintain composure under increasing pressure. The shooters around her had decades of experience in exactly these situations. Jake Morrison completed his first shot with characteristic confidence, not even bothering to check his scope before standing up. His casual attitude suggested complete certainty in his abilities, a luxury Sarah could not yet afford. "Not bad for a first-timer," she heard someone say, though whether the comment referred to her performance or someone else's remained unclear. The scoring for the first round was posted quickly. Sarah found her name in 8th place, a respectable position that neither impressed nor embarrassed. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she belonged on the same firing line as these experienced competitors. But, as she prepared for the second stage, Sarah could feel the weight of expectations and assumptions pressing down on her shoulders. The easy part was over. Now came the real test of whether her months of preparation would translate into competitive success, or if the doubters would be proven right about the young woman with the bright rifle and big dreams. The morning sun climbed higher, promising a long day of challenges ahead. Sarah checked her equipment one more time, said a silent prayer, and prepared to face whatever came next. She had come too far to quit now, regardless of what anyone else thought about her chances. The second stage brought a new level of complexity that separated casual shooters from serious competitors. The targets had moved to 100 yards, and competitors now faced a time limit that added pressure to every shot. Sarah watched as the first group of shooters took their positions, studying their techniques and timing. Marcus Webb, shooting in the position beside her, moved with the efficiency of decades of experience. His rifle setup was minimal but precisely adjusted, and his shooting rhythm appeared almost mechanical in its consistency. Sarah noticed how he controlled his breathing, the smooth way he operated his bolt action, and the complete absence of wasted motion. Time pressure changes everything, her father had warned her during practice sessions. When that clock starts ticking, your heart rate goes up, your hands shake, and everything you thought you knew can disappear. Sarah had experienced this phenomenon during practice, but never under the scrutiny of 20-plus experienced shooters who seemed eager to watch her fail. The whispered conversations continued around her, and she caught fragments of betting pools being organized around her expected performance. "Third round, she'll crack," predicted one voice. "I give her until the moving targets," countered another. Danny Price, adjusting his scope with unnecessary dramatic flair, looked over at Sarah's setup with obvious disdain. "Nice decorations," he commented loud enough for others to hear. "Did you get those stickers from a children's craft store?" The comment generated the expected chuckles from nearby competitors. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to remain focused on her equipment check. Her father had taught her that emotion was the enemy of accuracy, and she could not afford to let their words affect her performance. "Second group, prepare to shoot," announced Range Master Harrison. Sarah's group moved to the firing line, and she settled into position behind her decorated rifle. The 100-yard target seemed smaller and more challenging than the previous distance, even though she had practiced at this range many times. The difference was the timer mounted prominently where all shooters could see it, counting down their allotted time. Through her scope, Sarah could see the target clearly. The center ring looked achievable, but she knew that achieving perfect center shots under pressure was exponentially more difficult than doing so during relaxed practice sessions. Her hands felt steadier than she had expected, though her heart rate remained elevated. "Shooters ready." The familiar call helped center her focus. Sarah adjusted her breathing pattern, settling into the rhythm that had become second nature during months of preparation. Around her, other shooters made final adjustments to their positions and equipment. "Take aim." Sarah's crosshairs settled on the target center. Through her peripheral vision, she was aware of other shooters making similar preparations, but her attention narrowed to the critical relationship between her rifle, the target, and the technique that would determine her shot placement. "Fire at will." 60 seconds on the clock. The timer began immediately, adding urgency to every movement. Sarah fired her first shot, confident in her sight picture and trigger control. The recoil felt familiar and comfortable, but she had no time to admire her work. She cycled the bolt action smoothly, chambering her second round while maintaining her sight picture on the target. Around her, the rapid-fire sequence of shots indicated other competitors were moving quickly through their allotted rounds. Sarah found her rhythm: aim, breathe, squeeze, cycle, repeat. Her practice sessions had prepared her for this pace, though the pressure of competition added an edge that training could not replicate. With 15 seconds remaining, Sarah completed her fifth and final shot. She had maintained good form throughout the sequence, and her timing felt solid. More importantly, she had not allowed the surrounding competition pressure to disrupt her shooting fundamentals. "Cease fire. Clear your weapons and step back from the line." The command brought immediate compliance from all shooters. Sarah engaged her safety and opened her bolt, confirming her chamber was empty before stepping away from her firing position. The relief of completing the stage successfully mixed with nervous anticipation about her scoring results. The electronic scoring system processed results quickly, but the wait felt interminable. Sarah found herself standing beside her father, who offered quiet encouragement without drawing attention to their conversation. "How did it feel?" Tom asked softly. "Good," Sarah replied honestly. "Better than I expected with everyone watching." "That's the hardest part," her father confirmed. "Once you can shoot under pressure, everything else becomes manageable." The scores appeared on the display board, and Sarah scanned for her name. 8th place again, maintaining her position from the first round. More significantly, her score had improved relative to her personal practice averages, suggesting she was handling the competition pressure well. Jake Morrison maintained his lead with characteristically strong performance, but several other shooters had posted impressive scores that kept the overall standings competitive. Sarah noticed that two experienced competitors had actually scored lower than her on this stage, a small victory that boosted her confidence. "Still hanging in there, I see," observed Marcus Webb as he gathered his equipment. His tone was neutral, neither encouraging nor discouraging, but Sarah detected a hint of surprise that she had maintained her position. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied respectfully. "Your form looked solid," Marcus continued, offering the first neutral assessment she had received from a fellow competitor. "Your father taught you well." The comment was brief but significant. Coming from a shooter of Marcus's caliber, it represented a grudging acknowledgement that Sarah might be more than just a novice with expensive equipment. However, not all observers were becoming more accepting. Danny Price made a point of checking Sarah's target through his spotting scope, shaking his head dramatically as he examined her shot grouping. "Lucky shots," he announced to anyone within earshot. "Let's see how she handles the real challenges." His comment reminded Sarah that the competition was far from over. The third stage would introduce wind conditions and longer distances that would test skills she had only recently begun developing. Her practice sessions had included work at these distances, but always under controlled conditions that might not reflect the variables of competition day. The third stage setup required competitors to engage targets at 150 yards with natural wind conditions affecting bullet trajectory. Sarah had studied wind reading techniques extensively, but applying that knowledge under pressure remained largely theoretical. "Winds picking up from the southwest," observed Range Master Harrison as he prepared the third stage. "Steady at about 8 miles per hour with occasional gusts. Adjust accordingly, people." Sarah watched as experienced competitors began making scope adjustments and checking wind flags positioned around the range. Their movements suggested familiarity with these calculations that she lacked. Her practice sessions had included basic wind compensation, but nothing approaching the intuitive understanding displayed by seasoned shooters. "This is where the kids get separated from the adults," Jake Morrison announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. His comment was clearly directed at Sarah, though he maintained the pretense of general observation. The pressure was building, but Sarah refused to let intimidation affect her performance. She had come this far, and, regardless of the ultimate outcome, she was determined to complete the competition with dignity. Her decorated rifle might draw mockery, but her shooting would speak for itself. As competitors began preparing for the third stage, Sarah focused on her equipment and mental preparation. The real test was about to begin, and everything she had learned about shooting and competition would be put to the ultimate examination. The morning sun had given way to variable cloud cover, adding another layer of complexity to the already challenging conditions. She checked her rifle one more time, adjusted her position for the new distance, and prepared to face whatever challenges the next stage would bring. Around her, the atmosphere had shifted from casual mockery to serious competition focus, as the increasing difficulty began affecting all shooters regardless of their experience level. The whispered betting pools had grown quiet as concentrating on their own performance became more important than predicting others' failures. Sarah found this shift encouraging. Finally, the focus was returning to shooting skill rather than social dynamics and preconceptions about who belonged on the competition firing line. With determination replacing nervousness, Sarah prepared for the third stage, knowing that this was where her months of preparation would either validate her dreams or expose the limitations of her experience. Either way, she was committed to finding out exactly what she was capable of achieving. The wind had intensified as the third stage commenced, creating conditions that would challenge even experienced shooters. Sarah watched the wind flags dancing unpredictably, trying to read the patterns her father had taught her to recognize. The flag showed a general southwest direction, but the gusts created moments of significant variation that would require careful timing. 150 yards, natural wind conditions, 5 shots, 90 seconds, Range Master Harrison announced. This stage will test your ability to read conditions and adapt accordingly. Sarah's group prepared to shoot while she studied the first group's performance. She watched how different competitors handled their wind calculations, noting the variety of approaches and timing strategies. Some shooters waited for lulls in the wind, while others attempted to calculate compensation for the current conditions. Jake Morrison, shooting in the first group, demonstrated the confidence that came with years of experience. His shots were deliberate but quick, suggesting he trusted his ability to read wind conditions instinctively. His target showed a tight grouping that maintained his leading position. "Your turn, Princess," Danny Price said as Sarah's group was called to the line. His mockery had become more pointed as the stages progressed, perhaps reflecting his own pressure as the competition intensified. Sarah ignored the comment and focused on her setup. The 150-yard target appeared significantly smaller through her scope, and she could see the effects of wind on the grass between her position and the target. Her father had taught her to look for these natural indicators, but applying that knowledge under pressure remained challenging. "Shooters ready." Sarah settled into her firing position, feeling more comfortable than she had in previous stages. The rhythm of competition was becoming familiar, and her nerves had settled into focused concentration rather than anxious energy. "Take aim." Through her scope, Sarah studied the target while simultaneously checking the wind flags in her peripheral vision. The wind appeared to be holding steady at approximately 8 miles per hour from the southwest, which would require her to aim slightly into the wind to compensate for bullet drift. Fire at will. 90 seconds on the clock. Sarah waited a moment, watching the wind flags for a pattern. Her father had taught her that patience often produced better results than rushing, even under time pressure. When the flags showed a brief period of consistency, she fired her first shot. The recoil felt familiar, but she could not determine shot placement immediately due to the increased distance. Sarah cycled her bolt action and prepared for her second shot, again waiting for favorable wind conditions before firing. Her rhythm felt smooth and controlled, very different from the nervous tension she had experienced in earlier stages. The hours of practice were translating into muscle memory that functioned even under competition pressure. With 30 seconds remaining, Sarah fired her fourth shot and prepared for her final round. The wind had remained relatively consistent throughout her shooting sequence, which should have allowed for good shot placement if her calculations were correct. Time. Cease fire. Sarah completed her sequence with 10 seconds to spare, feeling satisfied with her performance regardless of the scoring results. She had maintained good form, made deliberate wind calculations, and executed her shots according to plan. As the targets were scored, Sarah tried to read her grouping through her spotting scope. The shots appeared to be clustered near the center, though the increased distance made precise assessment difficult. More importantly, she felt confident that her shooting fundamentals had remained solid throughout the challenging stage. The scores were posted, and Sarah found her name had moved up to 6th place. More significantly, several experienced competitors had scored lower than her on this stage, suggesting that the wind conditions had proven challenging for everyone. "Well, I'll be damned," she heard Marcus Webb mutter as he studied the results. "Girl can actually shoot." The comment was quiet, probably not intended for her to hear, but it represented the first clear acknowledgement that her performance might be legitimate rather than lucky. However, not everyone was ready to revise their assessments. Danny Price examined Sarah's target with obvious skepticism, shaking his head as if he could not believe the results. "Wind must have helped her," he said loud enough for others to hear. "Lucky gusts at just the right time." Jake Morrison said nothing, but Sarah noticed he was studying her target more carefully than he had in previous stages. His expression suggested concentration rather than dismissiveness, indicating that perhaps even the defending champion was beginning to take her seriously. "Fourth stage in 15 minutes, announced Range Master Harrison. 200 yards, moving targets, 5 shots, 2 minutes. This is where things get interesting, folks." The moving target stage represented Sarah's greatest challenge. Her practice had included some work with moving targets, but nothing approaching the complexity of the competition course. The targets moved laterally across the range at varying speeds, requiring shooters to lead their shots while maintaining accuracy at an extended distance. Sarah watched the target system during a demonstration run. 3 targets moved independently across a backdrop at 200 yards, requiring shooters to engage them in sequence within the time limit. The movement patterns appeared random, though she suspected they followed a programmed sequence that experienced competitors might have learned from previous competitions. "This is where your inexperience will show," Danny Price said as he prepared his equipment for the fourth stage. Moving targets separate the real shooters from the wannabes. For the first time, Sarah felt genuine concern about her ability to complete a stage successfully. The moving targets looked incredibly challenging, and her limited practice at this skill suddenly seemed inadequate. She watched other competitors making scope adjustments and discussing lead calculations, using terminology that was only partially familiar to her. "Stay calm," her father advised quietly as they reviewed her equipment. "Remember what we practiced. Pick your targets, lead them properly, and squeeze smoothly. Don't try to rush." Tom's advice helped center Sarah's focus, but she could feel her confidence wavering for the first time since the competition began. The moving targets represented a significant step up in difficulty that might expose the limitations of her experience. As the first group took their positions, Sarah studied their techniques carefully. She watched how they tracked the targets, noted their timing decisions, and observed their follow-through after each shot. The successful shooters appeared to anticipate target movement rather than simply reacting to it. Jake Morrison's performance on moving targets was particularly impressive. His shots appeared effortless, as if he could predict exactly where each target would be at the moment his bullet arrived. His score reflected this mastery, maintaining his overall lead with room to spare. Second group, prepare to shoot. Sarah's stomach tightened as her group was called forward. This was the moment she had been dreading since reading the competition schedule. Her limited experience with moving targets suddenly felt like a critical weakness that would be exposed in front of everyone who had doubted her abilities. At her firing position, Sarah tried to calm her breathing and focus on the fundamentals her father had taught her. The moving targets looked fast and unpredictable, but she reminded herself that other shooters had successfully engaged them using techniques she had at least practiced. "Shooters ready." Sarah settled behind her rifle, tracking one of the moving targets through her scope to get a feel for the movement pattern and speed. The target moved smoothly from left to right, paused briefly, then reversed direction. Understanding this pattern would be crucial for timing her shots effectively. "Take aim." Sarah selected her first target and began tracking its movement, trying to establish the proper lead distance for her bullet to intersect with the target's path. Her father had taught her to think of it like throwing a football to a running receiver, aim where the target would be, not where it currently was. Fire at will. 2 minutes on the clock. The timer started, and Sarah immediately felt pressure to begin shooting quickly. However, she forced herself to wait until she felt confident in her target tracking and lead calculation. Patience had served her well in previous stages, and rushing now would likely result in missed shots. Sarah fired her first shot at a target moving from right to left, leading it by what felt like the appropriate distance. The shot felt good, though she could not immediately assess its effectiveness due to the target's continued movement and the distance involved. She quickly acquired her second target and repeated the process, tracking the movement pattern before firing. Her breathing remained controlled, and her shooting position felt stable despite the added complexity of engaging moving targets. With 60 seconds remaining, Sarah had fired 3 shots and was preparing for her fourth. The time pressure was significant, but not overwhelming if she maintained her current pace. She selected another target and began tracking its movement, waiting for the optimal moment to fire. Sarah's fourth shot felt perfect as it left the barrel, her lead calculation and timing synchronized with the target's movement pattern. With 30 seconds remaining, she had one final shot to complete the most challenging stage of the competition. The moving target seemed to mock her as it glided across the range, but she forced herself to maintain the patient approach that had served her well. She selected her final target and began tracking its movement, establishing the rhythm that would allow her to predict its position when her bullet arrived. 20 seconds. 15. 10. Sarah squeezed the trigger smoothly, completing her sequence with seconds to spare. Cease fire. Clear your weapons and step back. Sarah engaged her safety and cleared her chamber, stepping away from the firing line with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had completed the moving target stage, but scoring would determine whether her shots had found their marks or sailed harmlessly past the elusive targets. The electronic scoring system processed the moving target results more slowly than the previous stages, building suspense among competitors and spectators. Sarah tried to read her target through her spotting scope, but the distance and movement patterns made assessment nearly impossible. Results posting, announced Range Master Harrison. Sarah found her name on the scoreboard and blinked in surprise. 4th place. Not only had she successfully engaged the moving targets, but her score had moved her up 2 positions overall. Around her, she could hear surprised murmurs from competitors who had expected her to struggle with the advanced challenge. "Holy shit," Danny Price said, loud enough for everyone to hear. For the first time, his mockery was absent, replaced by genuine surprise. "She actually hit them." Marcus Webb was examining the detailed scoring breakdown with obvious interest. 4 out of 5 hits, he announced to no one in particular. That's better than half the field managed. Even Jake Morrison was studying the results with a furrowed brow. His lead remained secure, but Sarah's consistent improvement had elevated her from amusing distraction to legitimate competitor. The pink rifle that had drawn so much mockery was producing results that could no longer be dismissed as luck. 1 stage remaining, announced Range Master Harrison. 300 yards, precision shooting, 5 shots, no time limit. This is our championship stage, people. Everything comes down to these final shots. The final stage represented pure precision shooting at the maximum distance. Sarah had practiced at 300 yards, but never under the pressure of competition with so much at stake. This stage would determine final standings and settle the question of whether her performance throughout the day represented genuine skill or fortunate circumstances. As competitors prepared for the final stage, Sarah noticed a significant change in the atmosphere around her. The casual mockery and dismissive comments had largely ceased, replaced by the focused concentration that accompanied serious competition. Even her harshest critics seemed to recognize that her performance demanded respect, regardless of their personal opinions about her equipment or experience level. Nervous, her father asked as they reviewed her rifle setup one final time. Excited, Sarah replied, surprising herself with the honesty of her response. The nerves that had dominated her morning had transformed into eager anticipation. She had proven she belonged among these shooters, and now she had an opportunity to discover exactly how far her skills could take her. The first group took their positions for the final stage, and Sarah watched their techniques with intense interest. 300 yards demanded absolute precision. Any error in fundamentals, scope adjustment, or wind calculation would be magnified dramatically at this distance. Jake Morrison's final stage performance demonstrated why he had dominated local competition for so many years. His shots appeared effortless, each one delivered with the confidence that came from countless hours of practice at extended ranges. His target showed a grouping that seemed impossibly tight given the distance and conditions. "That's what championship shooting looks like," Marcus Webb observed as Jake completed his sequence. Sarah studied Jake's technique, noting his deliberate pace and methodical approach to each shot. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, just the smooth execution of fundamentals that had been refined through years of serious competition. Other shooters in the first group produced varying results, with wind conditions and pressure affecting performance across the board. Sarah noticed that several experienced competitors struggled with the distance and conditions, suggesting that the final stage would challenge everyone regardless of their reputation or experience. Second group, final stage, called Range Master Harrison. This determines our champion and final standings. Shooters, take your positions. Sarah walked to the firing line feeling calmer than she had all day. The morning's nervousness had been replaced by focused determination and confidence in her abilities. Her pink rifle might look unconventional, but it was about to demonstrate that performance mattered more than appearance. At her firing position, Sarah began her setup routine methodically. 300 yards looked impossibly distant through her scope, but the target remained clear and achievable. Her practice sessions at this distance had prepared her for the challenge, though the competition environment added elements that training could not replicate. Shooters ready. Sarah settled into position behind her rifle, adjusting her scope for the extended distance and checking wind conditions one final time. The afternoon air was relatively calm, though slight breezes continued to affect the wind flags positioned around the range. Take aim. Precision stage, 5 shots, no time limit. Take your time and make them count. Sarah appreciated the absence of time pressure for this final challenge. She could focus entirely on executing perfect shots without rushing her process. Through her scope, the target center looked small but achievable, exactly the kind of challenge that had drawn her to precision shooting. Her first shot broke cleanly, the recoil familiar and comfortable after hundreds of practice rounds. Sarah cycled her bolt action smoothly and prepared for her second shot, taking time to verify her scope settings and wind calculations. Shot after shot, Sarah maintained her deliberate pace and careful technique. The distance demanded absolute precision, but her fundamentals felt solid and reliable. Each trigger squeeze produced the smooth surprise break that indicated proper technique, and her breathing remained controlled throughout the sequence. "That's 5 shots," Sarah announced as she completed her sequence. "Outstanding shooting," Marcus Webb said quietly. His comment carried genuine respect that would have seemed impossible during the morning setup period. As the final targets were scored, competitors and spectators gathered around the electronic display waiting for results that would determine final standings. Sarah felt satisfied with her performance regardless of the outcome. She had competed respectfully and demonstrated that she belonged among serious shooters. The results appeared on the display, and a hush fell over the assembled group. Sarah scanned the rankings, looking for her name among the final standings. 3rd place overall. The pink rifle that had drawn mockery and derision had delivered a performance that earned Sarah a podium finish in her first competition. Around her, experienced shooters who had dismissed her as a novice were studying the results with expressions of surprise and newfound respect. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake Morrison said, approaching Sarah with an extended hand. "Hell of a shooting, young lady. That was impressive work out there." His congratulations were genuine, delivered with the respect that one competitor showed another after witnessing legitimate skill under pressure. Sarah shook his hand gratefully, appreciating the acknowledgement from the champion she had admired from a distance. "Your father taught you well," Marcus Webb added, joining the small group gathering around Sarah. "That was some fine shooting today." Even Danny Price, though clearly disappointed by his own performance, offered grudging recognition. "Nice work," he said simply, though his tone suggested the words came with difficulty. Range Master Harrison approached with a bronze medal and certificate recognizing Sarah's 3rd-place finish. "Outstanding debut, Miss Matthews," he said as he presented her awards. "We look forward to seeing you compete again." Sarah accepted the recognition with gratitude and pride, though she was careful to remain gracious in victory. She had proven her point without the need for boastful celebration or pointed remarks toward her early critics. As competitors began packing their equipment, Sarah carefully placed her medal in the pink rifle case that had drawn so much attention. The decorative stickers and glittery letters suddenly seemed appropriate rather than embarrassing. They represented her personality and style, elements that had never affected her shooting ability. "How does it feel?" her father asked as they loaded equipment into their truck. "Like the beginning," Sarah replied honestly. Tom smiled, understanding exactly what his daughter meant. Today had been about proving she belonged, but it had also revealed her potential for future growth and achievement in competitive shooting. As they drove away from Pine Ridge Shooting Range, Sarah reflected on the day's transformation. She had arrived as an unknown quantity carrying a mockingly decorated rifle case, enduring dismissive comments and doubtful stares. She departed as a recognized competitor who had earned respect through performance rather than appearance. The bright rifle had indeed drawn mockery, but, one shot at a time, Sarah had silenced her critics and proven that skill transcended superficial judgments. Her journey in competitive shooting was just beginning, but she had established herself as a serious competitor who would no longer be underestimated. The sunset painted the Montana sky in brilliant colors as father and daughter headed home, the bronze medal resting safely in its pink case beside Sarah's rifle. tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but today had proven that appearances could be deceiving and that determination combined with skill could overcome any amount of initial skepticism. 6 months after her breakthrough performance at Pine Ridge, Sarah Matthews had become a regular fixture on the regional shooting circuit. The pink rifle case that once drew mockery now turned heads for entirely different reasons. Word had spread through the shooting community about the young woman who had shocked everyone with her debut performance, and competitors now approached her with curiosity rather than condescension. The Billings Regional Championship represented Sarah's biggest competition yet, featuring shooters from across Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. The prize money was substantial, and the winner would earn an invitation to the National Precision Shooting Championship in Colorado. For Sarah, it represented an opportunity to test herself against the highest level of regional competition. "Different crowd today," observed Tom Matthews as they surveyed the competition setup. The parking lot was filled with vehicles bearing license plates from multiple states, and the equipment being unloaded represented thousands of dollars in precision shooting gear. Sarah nodded, studying the other competitors with professional interest rather than intimidation. Her confidence had grown tremendously over the past months, built through consistent performance and growing recognition within the shooting community. The nervous young woman who had trembled at Pine Ridge had evolved into a focused competitor who belonged among serious shooters. "Sarah Matthews," a voice called from behind them. They turned to see a woman approaching with purposeful strides. She appeared to be in her 40s, carrying herself with the confidence of an experienced competitor. Her equipment case bore stickers from various national competitions, suggesting extensive experience at the highest levels. "I'm Rebecca Torres," she said, extending her hand to Sarah. "I've heard about your shooting. Impressive debut season." Sarah shook hands gratefully, recognizing the name from shooting magazines and competition results. Rebecca Torres was a former national champion who continued competing at the elite level while also coaching developing shooters. "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah replied. "I've read about your competitions. It's an honor to meet you. Mind if I watch your setup routine?" Rebecca asked. "I'm always interested in seeing how different shooters approach their fundamentals." The request surprised Sarah, but she felt flattered that a shooter of Rebecca's caliber would take interest in her techniques. As she organized her equipment, Rebecca observed quietly, occasionally asking questions about specific aspects of Sarah's routine. "Solid fundamentals," Rebecca commented as Sarah completed her setup. "Your father clearly understands precision shooting instruction." "He's been patient with me," Sarah acknowledged. "Lots of practice sessions in all kinds of conditions. It shows. Your consistency scores have been impressive across different ranges and weather conditions." "That's not accident." Rebecca's assessment meant more to Sarah than any trophy or medal. Recognition from a national-level competitor validated months of dedicated practice and suggested that her improvement trajectory had room for continued growth. The Billings competition format featured 6 stages of increasing complexity, culminating in a challenging unknown distance stage where competitors would need to estimate range and make appropriate adjustments without assistance. Sarah had practiced range estimation, but the pressure of competition would test her ability to apply those skills under stress. As competitors gathered for the opening ceremony, Sarah noticed several familiar faces from previous competitions, but many others were complete strangers. The regional championship had drawn serious shooters who traveled significant distances to compete, elevating the overall skill level well beyond local competitions. "Welcome to Billings Regional," announced the range master, a distinguished man whose reputation extended throughout the Western shooting circuit. "We have 64 competitors today representing 5 states. This is championship-level shooting, people. Bring your best." Sarah found herself assigned to firing position 31, surrounded by shooters whose equipment and demeanor suggested extensive competition experience. Unlike her debut at Pine Ridge, there were no dismissive comments or mocking observations about her decorated rifle case. Word of her abilities had preceded her, and she was now evaluated based on performance rather than appearance. The first stage was deceptively simple, 100-yard stationary targets with generous time limits. However, Sarah understood that championship competitions often began with straightforward stages that allowed competitors to establish rhythm and confidence before introducing complexity. As she prepared for her first shots, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her perspective had changed since Pine Ridge. The nervous anticipation had been replaced by eager excitement about testing herself against high-level competition. Her pink rifle felt like a trusted partner rather than a source of embarrassment. Shooters ready. Sarah settled into position, her movements now automatic and efficient after months of practice and competition. Through her scope, the target looked clear and achievable, though she knew that championship scoring would demand accuracy levels beyond what she had previously achieved. Take aim. Her breathing steadied into the controlled pattern that had become second nature. Around her, other shooters made final position adjustments, but Sarah felt comfortable and prepared for whatever challenges the day would bring. Fire. Sarah's first shot broke cleanly, the recoil familiar and reassuring. She had shot thousands of rounds since Pine Ridge, refining her technique through dedicated practice and competition experience. The fundamentals that her father had taught her now felt natural and reliable under any conditions. The first stage concluded successfully for most competitors, with scoring that reflected the high skill level present at the regional championship. Sarah found herself in 15th place after the opening stage, a respectable position that suggested she was competitive with the expanded field. Rebecca Torres had posted the top score on the opening stage, demonstrating why she remained competitive at the national level. Her technique appeared effortless, though Sarah knew that apparent ease represented years of dedicated practice and competition refinement. The second and third stages introduced time pressure and wind conditions that began separating competitors based on experience and adaptability. Sarah maintained her position in the middle of the field, shooting consistently while avoiding the dramatic errors that eliminated some competitors from contention. However, the fourth stage presented a challenge that would test every aspect of Sarah's development over the past months. Moving targets at 250 yards in variable wind conditions, with a time limit that pressured even experienced shooters. "This is where things get interesting," observed the shooter next to her as they prepared for the moving target stage. Sarah nodded, studying the target system that featured multiple targets moving in complex patterns across the range. Her practice with moving targets had improved significantly since Pine Ridge, but this stage represented a level of difficulty she had never encountered in competition. As the first group took their positions, Sarah watched their techniques carefully. The successful shooters demonstrated an intuitive understanding of target movement that came only through extensive experience. Their shots appeared effortless, though she knew each one required precise calculations of lead, timing, and wind compensation. Rebecca Torres's performance on moving targets was particularly instructive. Her shots were deliberate but quick, suggesting complete confidence in her ability to read target patterns and adjust accordingly. Her score reflected this mastery, maintaining her position at the top of the leaderboard. Second group, prepare to shoot. Sarah's group moved to the firing line, and she settled into position behind her pink rifle with growing confidence. The months of practice and competition had prepared her for exactly this type of challenge, and she felt ready to demonstrate her improvement. Through her scope, Sarah studied the moving targets, identifying patterns and timing sequences that would allow her to engage them effectively. The targets moved faster than those at Pine Ridge, but her understanding of lead calculations had improved dramatically through dedicated practice. Fire at will. 2 minutes on the clock. Sarah immediately began tracking her first target, establishing the rhythm that would allow her to predict its position when her bullet arrived. Her movements felt smooth and confident, very different from the nervous uncertainty she had experienced during her debut competition. Her first shot felt perfect as it left the barrel, timing and lead calculations synchronized with years of practice. Sarah quickly acquired her second target and repeated the process, maintaining the patient approach that had served her well throughout her competition development. Shot after shot, Sarah maintained her rhythm and technique, engaging each target with deliberate precision rather than rushed anxiety. Her breathing remained controlled, her position stable, and her confidence high as she completed the challenging sequence. Cease fire. Sarah cleared her weapon and stepped back from the line, feeling satisfied with her performance regardless of the scoring results. She had engaged all targets within the time limit and maintained good form throughout the sequence. The scoring results elevated Sarah to 8th place overall, a significant improvement that reflected her growing skills and competition maturity. More importantly, she had successfully handled a challenging stage that eliminated several experienced competitors from contention. "Outstanding shooting," Rebecca Torres commented as they prepared for the 5th stage. "Your moving target technique has improved dramatically." The recognition from a national champion meant everything to Sarah, validating months of dedicated practice and confirming her trajectory toward elite-level competition. Her pink rifle might still draw attention, but now it represented proven performance rather than questionable judgment. The final 2 stages would determine the championship and establish Sarah's standing among the region's best shooters. She had come farther than anyone had expected, including herself, but the ultimate test of her abilities lay ahead in the most challenging stages of the competition.